For my informative speech, I chose to talk about the Trail of Tears. To start this speech, I looked up the definition of the Trail of Tears, which I found on dictionary.com. The Trail of Tears is defined as the route along which the United States government forced several tribes of Native Americans to migrate to reservations west of the Mississippi River. This event occurred between the 1830s and the 1850s. This event was caused by many different factors, which ultimately led to Andrew Jackson's removal of the Native Americans along the Trail of Tears. This event is important to me because it discusses the importance of the history of the Native American people. There were many different factors which ultimately led to Andrew Jackson's removal. It all began when the Cherokee Nation established their constitution in 1827. Lydia Bjornlund discusses this in her book, as it was very important because the Cherokee people were trying to protect their lands and themselves from white encroachment. With many white settlers encroaching on their land, the Native Americans were trying to protect their rights. In order to do this, they created many different treaties with the United States government. These treaties ceded off portions of their land to the government and to white settlers in hopes to protect certain parts of their land. Unfortunately, not many white settlers abided by these treaties, which led to much conflict between the two different groups. Because neither were abiding the treaties, the conflict grew, and white settlers began to fear the Native Americans, which led to even more conflict. The Native Americans would attack settlers trying to protect themselves, and the white settlers would attack the Native Americans trying to protect themselves. Ultimately, the white people wanted to remove the threat of the Native Americans, which led to the Indian removal. The government took away Native American rights, which made all of the past treaties not applicable. The government refused to honor the treaties that the Native Americans had worked tirelessly to complete. The Native Americans went to Washington, D.C. to ask Congress for help, but unfortunately they would not assist them. This was only made worse when the gold rush occurred in 1829. Gold was found in Georgia on Indian land, which caused many white settlers to rush into their land. This is discussed on pbs.org in their article. The government then decided to set aside land in the West, and Andrew Jackson passed the Indian Removal Act in 1830, which is my first image. My first visual aid is an image of Andrew Jackson, who is the person who decided to pass the Indian Removal Act in 1830. And this information is discussed in both Lydia Bjornlund's book and on pbs.org. After Andrew Jackson passed the Indian Removal Act, there was a very long journey for all of the Native Americans who had to go along the Trail of Tears. And before the Trail of Tears occurred, many Native Americans decided to leave just because they didn't feel safe in their homeland. Only 2,000 had migrated, though, as pbs.org discusses. By 1838, only 2,000 had migrated, and 16,000 remained on their land. This meant that 16,000 people were forced to migrate along the Trail of Tears by federal troops. It says that in June of 1838, the first Cherokee group was driven west by 7,000 troops, which is discussed on pbs.org and both in Lydia Bjornlund's book. Along this journey, the Native Americans were forced to travel in many different ways. They traveled in flatboats, wagons, and on foot. My second visual aid is a picture of their journey. Along this journey, the weather was very unpredictable and was very hot, which caused many to die from disease, hunger, and severe heat. PBS.org says that over 4,000 people died from these factors. Along the journey, the people traveled along many different rivers, including Ohio, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Mississippi rivers. And during this journey, many of the people were under many different factors. I have another image. My final image is the route along which the people traveled. And this shows the different routes which they took, which followed the rivers, and that they were forced to travel. And because many of them were traveling on small boats, this led to many more issues. Lydia Bjornlund discusses this in her book because one of the boats capsized, which led to many people dying. And in 1837, the Jackson administration had removed over 46,000 Native American people. And this journey was very very traumatizing to the Native American people and has impacted their history. And in conclusion, the Trail of Tears was a major event in the United States history. It devastated the Native Americans and specifically the Cherokee Nation. The many different factors that led to the removal of the Native Americans created conflict and a lasting impact on both the Native American people and on the United States. Thank you.